For today's webinar, we're excited to go through another industry. We selected a part from the motorsports industry. So with that, let's go ahead and jump right into our PowerPoint presentation here. So as you can see, this part comes off of a scooter here, and this is a part that we were scanning and reverse engineering, and people come up with different designs for this. And it's a really cool looking surfacing example. So I really wanted to use it to highlight how you can surface very complicated parts inside of Design X. And as you know, as you've been following our webinar series, on these webinars, I take slightly different approaches depending on the week. Last week we did a two-part series, last week and the week before, where we took a project from beginning to end and I walked through it live from scanning to modeling the part. Today's is going to be back to the original example of this webinar, the original format, where we take a really complicated, really neat example and roll back through the history and show how this part was modeled. So both formats are needed, I believe. So I'm going to continue on with this where we take a break from the rollback style and we'll show some live project modeling and then kind of use both of those because we have a wide array, a wide audience that watches these. And for some people, seeing examples of how complicated models were achieved inside of Design X is very valuable, where you can look at how somebody approached that model and you learn a lot of valuable information on how to break down a model and how to approach it from those type of webinars. And then other people are looking for this webinar to demonstrate some of the basics of how do I scan? How do I extract planes? You know, there's just so many different examples. So people are in varying different places. Now, when I do these rollback webinars like this one, I often stop and pause on a piece of functionality. I usually select a few different pieces of functionality to highlight while we're scrolling through the history to show how it was modeled. For example, one week I stopped and I talked about how to extract different types of features from scan data reference entities and how those work and give different examples of extracting things. So there is valuable information wound in the rollback examples. So with that long introduction, we will jump over to our next slide, and then we'll jump over to Design X and show how this part was modeled. As usual, before we get started with our Design X portion of our webinar, I always like to bring up this slide. I know for some people that watch weekly, this slide can get a little redundant, but we just wanted to make sure that everyone that jumps on the webinar understands the workflow and where Design X fits in here. So as you can see here on the left-hand side, we have different types of 3D scanners, and Design X has the ability to connect to those scanners with plugins and import tools, and we have done it for over 30 years, so we have every kind of importer, file type, plugin imaginable to connect to these different types of 3D scanners. And then Design X is really a CAD platform that utilizes our own scan kernel that we have built from the ground up internally that allows us to handle all that scan data as native entities, bring that in, process it in a way that we can extract model information from it, whether it's CAD model information. Sometimes people want to go straight over to additive, as you can see on the right-hand side. But many times people want to extract CAD model information, both design intent or as built, and send that over to CAD. So by far the top section there is the number one output, where we have a live transfer tool that will allow you to transfer over the CAD information as native entities over to these different CAD platforms. The second one down is we can then save out models like step, I just sat, neutral, all these different uh, native interchange formats to send over straight to CNC packages for cutting stuff directly, or additive. Some additive packages will take CAD models or meshes, and we can save out to those as well. But that's what Design X's overall workflow is to handle that heavy lifting of grabbing scan data, bringing it in, processing it, extracting just the CAD information or 3D model information that you need, and sending it out to the proper output. Now, there's a whole other host of things that you could probably do. These are just the highlights of the different applications that we send out to on a routine basis. So with that, we'll go ahead and jump over to Design X for our presentation. So here we are with this radiator cover. As you can see, I rotated around. It's a really neat model, very complex geometry. And I don't know how else you would design something like this otherwise unless you would 3D scan it. It would be a long process of trying to design this without 3D scan data and being able to use Design X. But let's go ahead and roll back and walk through the workflow. This one's going to be very surface heavy, showing how to extract scan data extract surface information from scan data. So it's going to be a really neat surfacing workflow. So let's get in and start going. So, all right. So we roll back. Let's just turn on the scan data and we'll just roll forward. It looks like we're beginning down here on this end piece, and looks like we're going to fit these surfaces. As usual, that was a mesh fit and a loft wizard, and trimming them together and then filleting these two. So getting our feet wet here and jumping right in. Looks like we did a 3D mesh fit and then a loft. So in this instance here, they just went in and drew 3 different lines. This is a popular approach that I see a lot of people do in here, where they draw these flow lines around and then they loft between those 3 down. So if I turn the mesh off, just do a loft down that direction. And then go ahead and extend, because you create a nice clean surface. There we go. And then trim those together. So step forward here a few more. It looks like we trim all these together, fillet all these. So right out of the gate, I know this seems simple, but what we're noticing here is the approach that's happening, where we're going to work our way around the outside and kind of identify the boundary of the part. It looks like that's the approach here as we kind of unfold, step forward and walk through the workflow here, which is a great technique. We're kind of roughing in the outer shape of the part and just going ahead and stitching the boundary together and creating it, lofting between those two, and stitching and sewing. I always say stitch just because that's I believe SolidWorks says it that way, right? But merging those surfaces or grouping those surfaces together. Everybody has a different term for their method here. We did one of those vertical lofts. That's what I like to call them, right? Or we drew the 3 lines and lofted it down. That's a good way to do it. Like, that's one way. I tend to, you'll notice me, if I model it, I'll do a boundary fit surface where I draw a square patch on it. I don't know. It just depends on how people think. So they did what I call the vertical, or maybe it should be called the horizontal loft. I don't know. And then go ahead and extend it. But RE is all about, as we go through these, and I do these week after week after week, learning the tools in the toolbox, these techniques, they're individual techniques that we're learning, if you're noticing the pattern here, um, of learning how to go about do a project with a certain amount of tools in your toolbox, and taking those tools and rearranging them in different orders in order to accomplish different shapes of geometry here. So you'll see here that in this one, they did a trim. They went ahead and trimmed back and did a loft between. So that is a technique like that we've covered in the past here, right? Where we sometimes two surfaces don't intersect like we've done over and over and over here. Sometimes you just draw a curve on that surface, do a trim surface with a curve, then loft between them, and now boom, you have a connector surface between the two. So that's like one technique in all these ones that we've communicated through here, and just understanding how to combine these tools, these techniques together to create these full projects. And that's really the focus of these style presentations that I do, is showing the unique tools that Design X brings to. So it looks like we did a fit here. We fit a sphere on that. And then now we're going to trim it in with everything else. Let's see, we fit another one over there. Let's see how we trim these together. Yeah, because that bottom one was another shape, and then that top one there. And then blend those together. Trim them, fillet them all together. So as you see, we're still walking around the outer band. And we'll see where we go. I might speed up a little faster because you can see we're only like 20% through this here. And I totally get that it can be a little bit repetitive seeing some of these things unfold. But really what we're trying to present is you're taking notes on the approach that led to how we got to this final product, right? And seeing how we get all the way to the final. So there we go. And we'll do 3 different trims there. I'm not sure exactly why they did that approach, but we'll see. We'll see. Lots of times there's reasons that sometimes if you didn't design it from scratch, you don't know that, oh, there's something about the scan data in there that maybe it was difficult to fit it a certain way or whatever, that you can utilize. With stuff like this, sometimes I utilize this other tool. Let me just turn the surfaces off. I'll just, if I'm looking at something from a certain perspective, with reverse engineering, sometimes there's an art form associated with it, right? I can fit geometry all day. Obviously, we talk about that all the time. But I might have covered this once or twice through here. But sometimes I just look at a part in that direction and I say, create a plane from my view direction right here. And hit OK. And there, we created a plane from my view direction. Now I'll do a mesh sketch. Like so. Hit OK. And, if I were going to do something similar to what they were doing here, drag this longer. So sometimes I'll do something along those lines where I'll just use my view direction and I'm like, that's just where I want it. I'm just going to make it that way, especially with these crazy organic shapes. And then I'll extrude that as a surface to create the surface that creates that side boundary. And now I'll just turn the surfaces on. So see, I just did that right there. Now I'm going to go ahead and nuke that just because I don't want to mess up something in the history by accident by throwing something in there. Um, but now we can jump forward, and you see that we're wrapping all the way around. Trim, trim, trim. And now we're over there where we just did a notch trim out of there. So we trimmed those together. We did a surface, trim them together, and then trim it away from our boundary. Um, and then we'll jump forward here. So now we're going to start creeping up this side here. So we fit those two together, extend them out. And then here's another example where these aren't going to trim together just by doing a trim to trim mutual. So this is an example where you use a 3D sketch to trim them back. Just another example, and then trim those back and band them together. And it looks like we're going to do the same thing. Just jump forward there. Over here. Oh, actually, no. This one we did. They did one of our horizontal lofts or vertical lofts, and of course we're gonna extend those together, and do the trim back method. I should almost like coin these and categorize them. We're gonna do the trim back on the side, trim back in a loft blend, and work our way around. So now they went ahead and it said, let's do a mesh fit for this. And then this is probably going to be created with a giant lofted blend or a fillet between surfaces. So you see, we went ahead and created it. Oh, they're going to they did another horizontal loft. And now we're going to trim and extend everything. Trim, extend to get these all to match up here. All right, so let's take a second here and turn off the older things and then hide that. So look at where we're at here. They went ahead and created this, and then drew this right there. You see they did both in one sketch, and now it looks like we're going to loft between them. So it wasn't a fillet that we ended up doing. We ended up trimming those two together. And then we're going to do some more mesh fits and keep working our way across the surface here. Mesh fit there, and a mesh fit here. And some of them we will trim them together if they manage to intersect, right? Then we're going to go back, and it looks like they actually are going to use some fillets on those. I figured they would do the trim back method. So there we go. This is the trim back method for sure. And loft between those. And sew it all together. Jump forward a little. Okay, so now we went ahead and took the interior that we worked on. So see, the approach now has been, we created an exterior, now we worked our way across the interior. Now, while it's not completely done yet, they went ahead and, I think for confusion's sake, because when you have this many surfaces trimming together, it's good to have these moments in time where you've stopped and trimmed it and simplified it. And then this is kind of the part going forward from here, right? So now we're going to fit another one and trim another one over here. and then do the cleanup work on it by filleting stuff. Oh, looks like we jumped over to the side, added the fillets over there. Okay, we just found the bottom of that hole is what we did. We just fit the bottom of that. That's why I was looking around the side there just to verify what that is. And then now we went ahead and fit the surface boundary for the hole, and we trim all that together and then trim it to the main piece. So we added that in and follow the same format, right? Now where do we go here with the fit, loft, and extend? Okay, so now let's just turn the surfaces off for a second. So it looks like now we're going to go ahead and work on the pockets, right? So that's why they didn't, I think, finish off this, as we're going to now trim in the pockets. So they're going to start with this pocket first, work your way around the boundary of that pocket by lofting it together and fitting it. There we go. And we just did one of our horizontal lofts. Turn the mesh off so we can see there. There we go. All right, so let's do this real quick. Turn off that so now we can see here. So we're kind of treating this, we're going to build a tool to then trim in with the greater part that we've been working on, right? So now I believe they're creating the outer boundary of that, and then we'll come in and we'll create these things as separate pieces and then trim in those. And again, I'll try to go a little faster here so you can see. It looks like we went ahead and trimmed all of it in first before we add some of those details. So we trimmed it all into the main piece, and then now we're going to work on trimming these guys together, right? And then we're going to create that one as well. Create that one, and then we'll probably cut those boundaries there. Okay, so now we're jumping over here. And it looks like we're going to work on this boundary hole, this guy right there. I'll leave that off for a second, and we'll just see where it goes. So we're going to go ahead and, because we're going to use this one to trim all of them together probably. And we'll just jump forward a few more. All right, so now we trimmed, we went around there, and then now we're going to come across and create the fins and trim those together. So you see how we did that? And we'll do the same thing over here to the other side, and we'll work our way back. And then wait, there we go. So we created this bridge tool, and we're creating another one here. Fitting along each. Perfect. And let's just forward through all of those because it's the same technique over and over again where we're fitting those, trimming them together to create each one of the fins. Fitting all of these. And here what we did is we went ahead and fit surfaces along the top. And then, oh, we're going to trim that down there on the side and loft it together to create a tool that trims the tops of all of those off. Instead of using fillets along the top edge, looks like we're going to do a surface offset over and over again to duplicate that piece, and then trim all of them. That looks so good. There we go. So I'll just turn the mesh off to see where we're at there. Now, trim all of them in, and we'll just turn this main piece on. So we trimmed all of these in to the main piece. Basically you see how we treated these as like individual pieces and trimmed them in. Then we trimmed all of these and created them and trimmed those in. Now we're going to go do a bunch of dress up features by filleting all that and trimming it away. So they trimmed the pockets here by doing a big extrusion from the top down, and then use those surfaces to trim. That looks awesome. Now, step forward, trim those pockets away. And then now what we're doing over here on the back side, just a second, let it finish calculating. There we go. So I'll just rewind back here just a second here because I went a little bit too far. So we took this piece, we had this giant tool that we've created, and we went ahead and ran a thicken. So now we have a solid, and we can then come back and start adding our dress up things here. So it looks like the fillet's there. All of the components here we're adding. So we right here, let's just turn the mesh on so we can see where we're going. We have a boss there. And just turn the solid off so you can see. So we created the male boss on this side. It looks like we'll and I boolean all that in. Now we will cut the other part away separately. So after you create the boss, then come back and cut that in. Now all your cleanup stuff. Perfect. So we're on the home stretch here. A lot of this is, again, coming back and just adding the bosses and different things and adding some trims. You see here there's more to trim on this side over there. So we'll just jump forward. You can see here we're coming back and trimming everything back to where it needs to be. Cutting from different directions. It looks like we're going to work our way around the outside where we're cutting everything back all the way around here. There we go. And it looks like we're going to have to add those ribs in there as well. So there's just a few areas where we're going to add these guys in. we went ahead and cut these bosses back as well. So with that, you see here, they just did a mesh fit across the top and then use that to do a cut right there. And then these delete faces, I'm not sure exactly where they are. So if we open them, this helps us identify where they are. So it looks like we're deleting and healing, which I use that occasionally. Sometimes I need to get rid of a CAD face and just let it, these are direct modeling techniques there. Now jump forward. There we go. We went ahead and thickened the surface. We trimmed it back on the top. Did our surface offset 0. And then we know where they're going with that. We cut that thing down and merge it in. Beautiful. And we got to still cut these down. So you see how they're going to knock those down. They did it with from a certain direction there. They did an extrusion and cut. Let's turn the mesh on so we can see. It's because there's some specialty stuff going on, so we have to handle those one at a time. And we'll turn that solid back on. Cut all of those individually, which took some time, I'm sure. And add some fillet stuff to that. And the rest, I think, is good to go from here. So, and then you got your fillets. So that is how to approach the crazy surface project. But as we talked about, wrapping around the outside, trim and stitch around the outside, then they worked their way across to trim and stitch all these surfaces, but added this in, and then kind of worked from there where we went around the inside here, went around the inside there, and then trimmed those surfaces, boundary surfaces together, and then built these bridges across every one, trimmed them all back. Then once they had that, they trimmed all these holes from the top, flip it over, right, and then start working on your backside to make it all with all your clearances and ribs and everything. So neat little project, really neat part. It goes this direction on the scooter to cover it protects the radiator, the air-cooled, I believe it's air-cooled radiator, and this is a cover for it, and it's a really neat application.